Former Vice President Joe Biden racking up the endorsements following his Super Tuesday wins.
I have decided that I am, with great enthusiasm, going to endorse Joe Biden.
I believe that Joe Biden will be the Democratic nominee, and I've always said I'm going to support whoever the nominee is.
This is the worst sign of the night. Bernie Sanders won the Michigan primary 4 years ago.
African-American voters sent out the bat signal to the rest of the Obama coalition.
His base is going the wrong way. He's losing voters. Voters who went for him last time are going for Joe Biden in this case.
The math says Joe is our prohibitive nominee. We need to bring the party together.
Faced with the terror of Bernie Sanders' nominee, the Democratic establishment is throwing absolutely everything they can at the Stop Sanders movement.
The coalescing that's happening tonight, that's happened in the last 24 hours, is clearly, obviously intended to try and stop Bernie's momentum.
Bernie took a big hit. A lot of the late deciding voters broke for Biden, and that kind of, put Biden over the edge. And the fact that he was able to win states like Massachusetts and Maine and Minnesota, that's a giant shock to the system.
If he gets killed in Illinois, Ohio, and Florida, it is definitely over. But for God's sake, have a one-on-one debate. Joe Biden is not competent. He's not.
Justice. Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
Atacado, demonizado.
Former Vice President Joe Biden and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. We're in a reality right now that might have seemed unimaginable a week ago. What do you say to the American people who are confronting this new reality?
First of all, my heart goes out to those who have already lost someone or those who are suffering from the virus. You can go to joebiden.com, and I laid it out in significant detail. But there are three pieces of this. First of all, I have to take care of those who, in fact, are exposed or likely to be exposed to the virus. Testing, we have to get the testing kits up and ready. I would have the World Health Organization. I'd take advantage of the test kits they have available to us. Secondly, I would make sure that every state in the union had at least 10 places where they had drive-through testing arrangements. I would also, at this point, deal with the need to begin to plan for the need for additional hospital beds. We have that capacity in the Department of Defense as well as with the FEMA. We have to deal with the economic fallout quickly. And that means making sure the people who, in fact, lose their job, don't get a paycheck, can't pay their mortgage, are able to pay it and pay them now and do it now. Small businesses be able to borrow interest-free loans.
If you were president right now, what's the most important thing you would do tonight to try to save American lives?
Well, first thing we have got to do, whether or not I'm president, is to shut this president up right now. Second of all, what we need to do, and I'm glad that he has called a state of national emergency, what we have got to do is move aggressively to make sure that every person in this country finally understands that when they get sick with the coronavirus, that all payments will be made, that they don't have to worry about coming up with money for testing. They don't have to worry about coming up with money for treatment. But right now, in this emergency, I want every person in this country to understand that when you get sick, you go to the doctor. When you get sick, if you have the virus, that will be paid for. Do not worry about the costs right now because we're in the middle of a national emergency. Second of all, we have to make sure that our hospitals have the ventilators that they need, have the IC units that they need. Right now, we have a lack of medical personnel. And I worry very much that if there is a peak, whether we have the capability of dealing with the hundreds of thousands of people who may be in hospitals. And bottom line, from an economic point of view, what we have got to say to the American people, if you lose your job, you will be made whole. You're not going to lose income. If Trump can or the Fed can put $1.5 trillion into the banking system, we can protect the wages of every worker in America.
We're in a situation where we have to now be providing for the hospitals that are going to be needed now. The present system cannot handle the surge that is likely to come. So we should already be sitting down and planning where we're going to put these temporary hospitals. And we can do that. We did that. We've been through this before with the coronavirus. We've been through this before. We've been through this before with dealing with the viruses that the N1H15, as well as what happened in Africa.
Let's be honest and understand that this coronavirus pandemic exposes the incredible weakness and dysfunctionality of our current healthcare system. There are people who are watching this program tonight who say, I'm not feeling well. Should I go to the doctor? But I can't afford to go to the doctor. What happens if I am sick? How come we don't have enough doctors? How come hospitals in rural areas are shutting down? How come people can't afford to get the prescription drugs they need because we have a bunch of crooks who are running the pharmaceutical industry, ripping us off? What an opportunity to make a fortune. So the word has got to go out, and I certainly would do this as president. You don't worry, people of America, do not worry about the cost of prescription drugs. Do not worry about the cost of the health care that you're going to get, because we are a nation, a civilized, democratic society. Everybody, rich and poor, middle class, will get the care they need. The drug companies will not rip us off.
Some medical experts are saying the only true way to control this virus is through a national quarantine, requiring every American other than essential personnel to stay home. Would you take that unprecedented step of a national lockdown?
What I would do is what we did in our administration. I would call a meeting in the Situation Room of all the experts in America dealing with this crisis. I would sit them down and I would do exactly what we did then. What is it that we need? Listen to the experts. What do we need? And with all due respect to Medicare for All, you have a single payer system in Italy. It doesn't work there. It has nothing to do with Medicare for All. That would not solve the problem at all. We can take care of that right now by making sure that no one has to pay for treatment, period, because of the crisis. No one has to pay for whatever drugs are needed, period, because of the crisis. No one has to pay for hospitalization because of the crisis, period. That is a national emergency, and that's how it's handled. It is not working in Italy right now, and they have a single-payer system. Now, with regard to what else I would do, the fact is that we're in a position where I would bring together the leading experts in the world. Instead of doing this in the United States, instead of doing this piecemeal, sit down and do what we did before with the Ebola crisis. What is needed? And have one voice so we lay out overall for all the nation what the best proposal is and how to move forward. It should be directed from the White House, from the Situation Room, laying out in detail like we did in the Ebola crisis, and we beat it.
Well, first of all, the dysfunctionality of the current healthcare system is obviously apparent. As I said earlier, there are people who hesitate to go to the doctor. You're going to have a maze of regulations. Well, if this is my income, if that's my income, can I get it? Can I not get it? Clearly, we are not prepared, and Trump only exacerbates the crisis. Bottom line here is, in terms of Medicare for all, despite what the vice president is saying, what the experts tell us is that one of the reasons that we are unprepared and have been unprepared is we don't have a system. We got thousands of private insurance plans. That is not a system that is prepared to provide health care to all people. In a good year, without the epidemic, we're losing up to 60,000 people who die every year because they don't get to a doctor on time. And clearly, this crisis is only making a bad situation worse.
That has nothing to do when you're in a national crisis. The national crisis says we're responding. It's all free. You don't have to pay for a thing. That has nothing to do with whether or not you have an insurance policy. This is a crisis. We're at war with the virus. We're at war with the virus. It has nothing to do with copays or anything. We just passed a law saying that you do not have to pay for any of this, period.
But the weakness of this is, let's just do a hypothetical. Family members diagnosed with the virus. Terrible tragedy, massive anxiety. The wife has the virus, the husband is a wreck, wants to go to a psychologist, wants to get counseling, doesn't have the money to do that. Bottom line is, we need a simple system which exists in Canada, exists in countries all over the world, and that is, if you are an American, you get the health care you need, end of discussion. Do we have the guts to take on the healthcare industry, some of which is funding the vice president's campaign? Do we have the courage to take on the executives at the prescription drug industry, some of which, some of whom are funding his campaign?
This is a national crisis. I don't want to get this into a back and forth in terms of our politics here. I've laid out a plan, building on Obamacare, providing a public option of Medicare that would cover everyone the same way. This idea that this is his only answer is a mistaken notion. But regardless of whether my plan was in place or his, this is a crisis. This is like we are being attacked from abroad. This is something that is of great consequence. This is like a war. And in a war, you do whatever is needed to be done to take care of your people. Everything that you need in terms of dealing with this crisis would be free. It is paid for by the taxpayers generally. Generally. It has nothing to do with Bernie's Medicare for All. I would call out the military.
Okay.
Now, they have the capacity to provide this surge help that hospitals need and that is needed across the nation. I would make sure that they did exactly what they're prepared to do. They've done it. They did it in the Ebola crisis. They've done it. They have the capacity to build 500-bed hospitals and are in tents that are completely safe and secure and provide the help to get it done to anybody, this overflow. So it is a national emergency. I would call out the military. The moment this broke out, that we should insist on having our experts in China to see what was happening and make it clear to China there'd be consequences if we did not have that access. And we have to lead the world. We should be the ones doing what we did during the Ebola crisis, bringing the whole world together and saying, this is what we must do. We have to have a common plan. All nations are affected the same way by this virus, depending on exposure. And so we need world leadership. We need international leadership. We need someone who knows how to bring the world together and insist on fundamental change in the way in which we're approaching this.
Well, the bottom line here is that in the midst of this crisis, we have got to act in an unprecedented way. And that means every country on earth is going to be affected. Every country on earth has got to work together. It also means that we tell the pharmaceutical industry, we tell the big money interests that this is not a time for profiteering. This is a time for all of us working together.
Many economists are warning of a recession. What would you do?
What I would do is make it clear to the world and make it clear to the United States that we are going to have a major, major, major bailout package, that we do not reward corporations. We reward individuals who, in fact, are really put to the test here. We're going to have to just level with the American people. And here's the deal. We're going to have to not only deal with the immediate crisis, economic crisis, which is the most critical now, to let people know their mortgages are going to be paid, their rents are going to be paid, they're going to have child care, they're going to make sure that all their medical bills are cared for relating to this, et cetera. We have to go beyond that. And we're going to have to be in a situation where we're meeting on a daily basis, like we did in the middle of the financial crisis, to decide how we are going to find the wherewithal and the money to be able to see to it we hold all these folks harmless.
The Ebola crisis, in my view, exposes the dysfunctionality of our healthcare system and how poorly prepared we are despite how much money that we spend. And the Ebola crisis is also, I think, exposing the cruelty and the unjustness of our economy today. So the lesson to be learned is we have got to move aggressively right now to address the economic crisis as a result of Ebola, keep talking about Ebola, you got Ebola in my head here right now, as a result of the virus here, the coronavirus. What we have got to do also is understand the fragility of the economy.
People are looking for results, not a revolution. They want to deal with the results they need right now. And we can do that by making sure that we make everybody whole who has been so badly hurt. In terms of they lose the job, in terms of not having the ability to care for their children, in terms of the health care costs that they have related to this crisis, we can make them whole now, and put in process a system whereby they all are made whole. That has nothing to do with the legitimate concern about income equality in America. That's real. That's real. But that does not affect the need for us to act swiftly and very thoroughly and in concert with all the forces that we need to bring to bear to deal with the crisis now.
Good. I agree. In fact, that was my idea originally, to make sure that every person in this country is made whole as a result of this crisis. But God willing, this crisis is going to end. And we are going to have to develop an economy in which half of our people are not living paycheck to paycheck and struggling to put food on the table.
I don't disagree with that. You were asking about the crisis. What are we going to do about the crisis now, which is incredibly consequential to millions and millions of Americans? And it's not going to be solved by a change in tax policy now. It's not going to be solved by a change in how we deal with health care. It's got to be solved with an emergency need right now. Right now. What do we do? What are the immediate needs? Right today. How about that person who's been laid off today? How about that person who doesn't have an income today? They have to know that tomorrow, when the paycheck comes due, you will get that paycheck. We have to think long term about how we deal with making all those who have been badly damaged right again. And then we move on. Then we move on to change the economy in ways that are more profoundly necessary than people think, but do not respond to the immediate needs we have now. First things first.
Senator Sanders, you voted against bailouts following the 2008 financial crisis.
Yes.
Many believe those spending bills were a crucial part of stabilizing the economy back then. Would you support bailouts for industries that are being crushed by the coronavirus outbreak now?
I did. You're quite right. I voted against the bailout because I believed that the illegal behavior being done by the people on Wall Street should not be rewarded by a bailout. And today, by the way, those banks are more prosperous and own more assets, and by and large, than they did back then. They're bigger now than they were then. I thought at the time that in the midst of massive income and wealth inequality, the people on top, through a surtax on the very wealthy, should bail out. And it's not just the TARP bailout. We gave trillions of dollars in zero-interest loans to large banks. But to answer your question, where we are right now, we need to stabilize the economy. But we can't repeat what we did in 2008. Joe voted for that. I voted against it. Our job right now is to tell every working person in this country, no matter what your income is, you are not going to suffer as a result of this crisis of which you had no control.
Vice President Biden.
Had those banks all gone under, all those people Bernie says he cares about would be in deep trouble. Deep, deep trouble. All those little folks, we'd have gone out of business. They'd find themselves in a position where they would lose everything that they had in that bank, whether it was $10 or $300 or a savings account. This was about saving an economy, and it did save the economy. And the banks paid back, and they paid back with interest. I agree with Bernie. Some of them should have gone to jail. That was the big disagreement I had in terms of bailing out.
The Fed gave trillions and trillions of dollars in zero-interest loans to every financial institution in this country and central banks all over the world. That was essentially a grant because they then could sell that. They can then bring in interest rates much greater than the zero-interest loans that they got.
Look, the fact of the matter is that if, in fact, the banks had all been gone under, we would be in a Great Depression. We would have not. How do you get out of that? Now, Bernie's saying that I guess he's going to do a wealth tax or something, that the top 1% could pay for everything, and they should pay for everything that occurred. We were talking about tens and hundreds of billions of dollars. That's what this was about. And the fact was that it saved the economy from going into a depression.
Make the case for why a revolution is not what the country needs or wants.
We have problems we have to solve now. Now, what's a revolution going to do? Disrupt everything in the meantime? Look, the senator talks about his Medicare for all. He still hasn't told you how he's going to ever get it passed. He hasn't told you how, in fact, there's any possibility of that happening. He hadn't told you how much it's going to cost. He hadn't tell you how it's going to apply. It doesn't kick in for 4 years even after it passes. We want a revolution. Let's act now. Pass the Biden health care plan, which takes Obamacare, restores all the cuts made to it, subsidizes further, provides for lower drug prices, make sure that there's no hidden bills, make sure that we invest, I want to invest $50 billion in dealing with underlying diseases that are of great consequence, diabetes, Alzheimer's, and cancer. Make sure that we have a Medicare option that's in a public option providing Medicare for us. We can do that now. I can get that passed. I can get that done if I'm President of the United States of America. That will be a fundamental change, and it happens now. Bernie still hasn't told us how he's going to pay for it. We're talking about a $30+ trillion plan.
Not quite true. Why is it that over the last 45 years, despite the huge increase in productivity, and technology, the average worker today is not making a nickel more in real dollars. Why is it that over the last 30 years, the richest 1% have seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth, bottom half of America, $900 billion decline in their wealth? Why is it that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right? Why are we the only major country not to have paid medical and family leave? Why do we give tax breaks to billionaires when 500,000 people are homeless today? And it comes down to something, Jake, we don't talk about. The power structure in America. I'll tell you who has the power. It's the people who contribute money, the billionaires who contribute money to political campaigns. If you want to create an economy that works for all, not just a few, if you want to guarantee quality health care to all, not make $100 billion in profit for the healthcare industry, you know what you need? You need to take on Wall Street. You need to take on the drug companies and the insurance companies and the fossil fuel industry. You don't take campaign contributions from them. You take them on and create an economy that works for all.
You want to do that? Do what I proposed over 30 years ago. Federally fund all elections. No private contributions in the election process. If you want to do that, join me. Join me in my constitutional amendment that I've been proposing. Maybe you and I can work on that together, because that would fundamentally change it. And the implication is I've not accepted a contribution from anybody over $2,800, number one. My average contribution is $44. Just this month, I've raised $33 million, average contribution $51. The idea that this is Bernie's implication is somehow I'm being funded by millionaires. Bernie, look, in the last Super Tuesday and before that, Bernie outspent me 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 1. And I still won. I didn't have any money, and I still won.
Senator Sanders?
Why don't you get rid of the super PAC that you have right now, which is running very ugly negative ads about me, by the way. Don't laugh, Joe. That's just the truth. And they got 2 other super PACs running ads against us. Why don't you just say right now, go on television and say, hey, you know what? I think in the past, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, you condemned super PACs. Is that correct?
You get rid of the 9 super PACs you have?
I don't have 9 super. I don't have any super
9.
PACs.
You want me to list them?
No. Yeah, you go ahead and list them.
Okay, come on. Give me a break.
This is the point. In the richest country in the history of the world, half of our people should not be struggling to put food on the table. And the reason for that is you have a political structure in which big money interests not only dominate the political system, but dominate our economy as well. Somebody makes a decision, we're going to shut down a factory in America, we're going to move to China, we're going to move to Mexico, pay people starvation wages there. This is an issue that has got to be ultimately dealt with. Who has the power in America? Are we content with so few exercising so much power when so many people have given up on the political process?
I can pay for my whole health care plan by changing the way in which we deal with capital gains. People should pay their capital gains based on what their income tax is, and not at 20%. That would raise $800 billion, pay for my entire medical health care plan, which would cover everyone. The fact of the matter is, everything I call for, I pay for. And I do not believe, and I have not supported these exorbitant tax cuts for the wealthy. My Lord, Bernie, you're running ads saying I'm opposed to Social Security, that PolitiFact says is a flat lie, and that the Washington Post said is a flat lie.
Have you been on the floor of the Senate? You were in the Senate for a few years.
Yeah.
Time and time again, talking about the necessity, with pride, about cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, cutting veterans programs.
No.
You never said that?
No.
All right. America, go to the website right now. Go to the YouTube right now. Come on, Joe, you won't.
Look, here's the deal.
You're an honest guy. Why don't you just tell the truth here? We all make mistakes.
I am telling the truth. Why am I rated 96% by the Social Security organizations? Why am I viewed as a strong supporter?
All that I said.
I have laid out how I will increase Social Security.
Well, that's good. I laid that out.
I have laid out how I'm going to make sure that it is in fact paid for.
Jake.
Go to JoeBiden.com. Look at my exchange with Paul Ryan on his desire to try to privatize and or cut Social Security. And understand how he manipulated it.
No, all right.
What is true is, in terms of the negotiations that are taking place, how to deal with the deficit, everything was on the table.
Whoa. Everything was on the table. All right, you're right. You just said it, including, in your judgment, cuts to Social Security and veterans.
In order to get the kinds of changes we need on other things related.
Joe, then
But
you
it
just...
didn't. But we did not cut it.
I know,
did not
because
vote for
people
it.
like me helped stop that. But Joe, you just you just contradicted yourself.
Bernie, will you acknowledge your campaign took out of context that whole exchange between Paul Ryan? Are you saying PolitiFact is wrong? Are you saying
Yeah,
the
well,
Washington Post
believe
is
me, the
wrong?
Washington Post, PolitiFact is wrong a whole lot of times. But
No, are they wrong on that, Bernie?
Okay.
Are they wrong on that, Bernie?
Joe,
did you miss?
Joe, did you? Wait a minute. I'll answer your question. You answer mine.
I answered yours.
No, you didn't.
All right.
One more time. Were you on the floor time and time again, for whatever reason, talking about the need to cut Social Security and Medicare and Veterans programs?
No, I did not talk about the need to cut any of those programs.
You can defend that or change your mind on it, but you can't deny the reality.
A few hours ago, you announced support for making public college tuition free for families who make less than $125,000 a year, something Senator Sanders has supported. What changed?
Two things. Number one, let's talk about the bankruptcy bill. The bankruptcy bill was passing overwhelmingly, and I improved it. I had a choice. It was going to pass at a Republican president, Republican Congress, and I offered two amendments to make sure that people under $50,000 would not be affected, and women and children would go to the front of the line on alimony and support payments. That's what I did. It passed overwhelmingly. I did not like the rest of the bill, but I improved it, number one. Number two, I've talked with Senator Warren about her proposal. This is the first opportunity we've had to make substantial change in what we couldn't get done in a Republican administration. That's why we talked 2 nights ago, and I supported her proposal. And it's a good proposal. It's a solid proposal. And she should get credit for having introduced it. 12 years of education is not enough for the 21st century. We need 16 years of education.
This is a little bit about leadership as well. Joe talked about bankruptcy. Joe, if my memory is correct, you helped write that bankruptcy bill.
I did not.
All right?
I
and that
did
bankruptcy bill, by the way, when we talk about education, we got 45 million people in America struggling with student debt, some of them really struggling with student debt. And that bankruptcy bill made it impossible, very difficult for people to escape from that student debt. It was a very, very bad bill. I voted against it in the House, and I was right. And I don't have to rethink my position, because that's what leadership is about, having the guts to take an unpopular vote. 4 years ago, when I said that public colleges and universities should be tuition-free, people were saying, Bernie, that's a radical idea. Well, you got states and cities and counties all over the country that are moving in that direction. And I'm glad that Joe is on board. But what leadership is about is going forward when it's not popular, when it's an idea that you get criticized for. So I'm proud of that fact, and I'm proud of my leadership on many issues.
Look, let's get something straight about the bankruptcy bill. The bankruptcy bill already, it did not affect student debt for 90% because the law had already been passed. You could not declare bankruptcy for those loans that were from private institutions. You couldn't do it. And so the bankruptcy bill didn't affect that. It affected 10% of the people, the first bankruptcy bill, 10% of the student loans, number one. Number two, now we're in a position where we're able to correct that problem. The fact is, if I hadn't stepped up and changed the law as it relates to people making less than $50,000, those who for alimony and child support, then guess what? They would have been in the bucket too. It was going to pass anyway. Let me finish. I made it incrementally better. I did not like the bill. I did not support the bill. And I made it clear to the industry I didn't like the bill. Number two, this bill now calls for the opportunity to fundamentally change the mistakes we couldn't correct in the bill the first time around. And that is why I support Elizabeth Warren's idea. And it's a very good idea.
Let's talk about the future, Vice President Biden. If you become the Democratic presidential nominee, how will you appeal to supporters of Senator Sanders when you do disagree on so many issues?
He's making it hard for me right now. I was trying to give him credit for some things. He won't even take the credit for things he wants to do. Look, I think that I want to make it clear. If Bernie's a nominee, I will not only support him, I will campaign for him. And I believe the people who support me will do the same thing. Because the existential threat to the United States of America is Donald Trump.
If I don't win the nomination, and I think every other Democratic candidate is prepared to come together to do everything humanly possible to defeat Donald Trump.
How will your cabinet ensure the best advice on issues that affect women's physical and financial health. Thank you.
My cabinet, my administration will look like America. Last I heard, over half of the people in America are women, and that will be the representation in my cabinet and my administration. And in terms of policies, unlike Joe, I have consistently believed, and have a 100% lifetime voting record from groups like NARAL, that it is a woman's right to control her own body, not the government. If you look at my agenda, which is on BernieSanders.com, what you will find, it is a very strong agenda in fighting for the rights of women who today are under incredible political assault by Trump and Republican governors all across this country.
Number one, I committed that if I'm elected president, have an opportunity to appoint someone to the courts, I'll appoint the first black woman to the courts. It's required that they have representation now. It's long overdue. Secondly, if I'm elected president, my cabinet, my administration will look like the country. And I commit that I will, in fact, I'll pick a woman to be vice president. There are a number of women who are qualified to be president tomorrow. I would pick a woman to be my vice president.
Joe, you have in the past, on more than one occasion, voted for the Hyde Amendment, which says that a woman, low-income woman, could not use Medicaid funding for an abortion. Is that still your view, or have you modified it?
It is not my view. I would send immediately to the desk of the United States Congress when I'm elected president, if I'm elected president, a codification of Roe v. Wade amended by Casey, because I think it is a woman's right to choose.
You recently said, for the first time, that the Obama-Biden administration made a big mistake in deporting millions of immigrants.
The fact is that we already had a vote on the immigration bill, by the way, and Bernie voted against it, the immigration bill. Had he voted for it and it passed, we'd already have 6 million undocumented would be citizens as I speak right now. But I will send to the desk immediately a bill that requires for access to citizenship for 11 million undocumented folks, number one. Number two, in the first 100 days of my administration, no one will be deported at all. From that point on, the only deportations that will take place are commissions of felonies in the United States of America.
Let me respond to Joe's comments about the 2007 immigration bill. The Southern Poverty Law Center called its guest worker programs akin to slavery. There wasn't really a vote on the bill. It was killed because there was a vote on the Dorgan Amendment. I think it was 49-48. And you know who voted with me on that one, Joe? Barack Obama. He understood that that proposal was a bad idea. We don't need slavery in America where workers, guest workers, are forced to stay with their employers. But in terms of immigration in general, let me outline some of the things that we do. Day one, we restore the legal status of 1.8 million young people and their parents in the DACA program. Number two, immediately, we end these ICE raids, which are terrorizing communities all over this country. Three, we change the border policy. Under my administration, no federal agent will ever grab little babies from the arms of their mothers. And fourth, I think we can pass what the American people want, and that is comprehensive immigration reform, path towards citizenship for the 11 million undocumented.
Senator Sanders, critics suggest positions like this send a message that when a Democrat is in the White House, the border is open. Do they?
No, that's what Trump says, and that is a total lie. What we're talking about is a humane, sensible policy supported by the American people. Nobody is talking about open borders.
Let me set the record straight, as someone has said. You know, the idea that it was slavery, Barack Obama supported that bill, that immigration bill. Teddy Kennedy supported that immigration bill. I supported it. I doubt whether those people think it's slavery. Well, and by the way, right after his vote against that, he went on the Lou Dobbs show and continued to canard that they're taking jobs. These immigrants are taking jobs from Americans, which is one of the Republican canards, right after that vote, that no vote. And so, come on. You think Ted Kennedy is for slavery? You think I was for slavery? You think people voted for it for slavery? And with regard to your issue, your question relative to whether or not I would deal with supporting the border. Look, we can deal with securing the border by national technical means.
What we need is, at the border, hundreds of administrative judges. We need to deal with people who are seeking asylum based on international law. We need not to be dividing children from their parents and dividing families up. We need a humane border policy.
The World Health Organization calls the climate crisis a, quote, health crisis, and warns that climate change could fuel the spread of infectious diseases. Can you point to specific measures in your climate plan that address that threat?
We are talking about the absolute need, and I want to hear Joe's position on this. This is not a middle-of-the-ground thing. This is not building a few more solar panels or a few more wind turbines. What this is about is transforming our energy system as quickly as we humanly can away from fossil fuel. It is insane that we continue to have fracking in America. It is absurd that we give tens of billions of dollars a year in tax breaks and subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. This has got to end, and end now, if we love our kids and future generations.
The price tag for your climate plan is about $1.7 trillion. That's about $14 trillion less than Senator Sanders wants to spend on this. Is your plan ambitious enough to tackle this crisis?
Yes, it is ambitious enough to tackle the crisis, because what you go to JoeBiden.com, I lay out the first 13 things I would do immediately upon being elected. Number one, we're going to once again reinstate all the cuts the president made and everything from the CAFE standards, how far automobiles can go, investing in light rail so that we take cars off the road, making sure we're in a position where we are now in a position that we put 500,000 charging stations in areas that, in fact, all new highways that we built, making sure that we spend $500 billion a year in the federal government paying for transportation, the vehicles we run, all of those being converted to be able to run on low carbon fuel and or be able to run on no carbon fuel at all by having them move into a direction that is all carbon free. We can do these things. We can lay down the tracks where nothing can be changed by the next president or following president, the one beyond that. In addition to that, we also have to, I would immediately rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, which I helped put together. I would call the 100 nations, over 100 nations, but the 100 major polluters to the United States in the first 100 days to up the ante.
All well and good, but nowhere near enough. I mean, you mentioned we started this debate talking about a warlike situation in terms of the coronavirus. And we said we have to act accordingly. You said it. I think you're right. I said it. We have to act dramatically, boldly, if we're going to save lives in this country and around the world. I look at climate change in exactly the same way. It's not a question of re-entering the Paris Accord. That's fine. Who cares? It's not a big deal. The deal right now is, do we have the courage? And this gets back to the point I'm trying to make all night long. Do we take on the healthcare industry and tell them their profits are not more important than healthcare for all? Do we take on the fossil fuel industry? Look, in terms of the fossil fuel industry, these guys have been lying. They've been lying for years, like the tobacco industry lied 50 years ago. Oh, we don't know if fossil fuels, if oil and carbon emissions are causing climate change. They knew. ExxonMobil knew. They lied. In fact, I think they should be held criminally accountable. But this, Jake, is an issue of enormous consequence. What Joe is saying goes nowhere near enough. I'm talking about stopping fracking as soon as we possibly can. I'm talking about telling the fossil fuel industry that they are going to stop destroying this planet. No ifs, buts, and maybes about it. I'm talking about speaking to China. Well, I'm not sure your proposal does that. I'm talking about speaking to China, to Russia, to countries all over the world. And in this moment, making the point that instead of spending $1.8 trillion on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other, maybe we should pool our resources and fight our common enemy, which is climate change. I know your heart is in the right place, but this requires dramatic, bold action. We've got to take on the fossil fuel industry. Your plan does not do that.
My plan takes on the fossil fuel industry and it unites the world. He just got finished saying, what's he going to do? He's going to bring these countries together, make it clear to them. I'm saying we bring them together, make them live up to the commitments. If they don't live up to the commitments, they pay a financial price for it. they pay an economic price for it because we can do everything. My state is 3 feet above sea level. I don't need a lecture on what's going to happen about rising seas. I know what happens. I watched the whole Delmarva Peninsula, just like it is in South Carolina and the rest. Something I know a little bit about. I wrote the first climate change bill that was in the Congress, which PolitiFact said was a game changer. I'm the guy who came along and said with Dick Lugar that we're going to trade, we'll forgive your debt if you don't cut down your forest. I've been way ahead of this curve. This idea that all of a sudden Bernie found this out is amazing to me. On the Recovery Act, I was able to make sure we invested $90 billion in making sure we brought down the price of solar and wind that is lower than the price of coal. That's why not another new coal plant will be built. I did that while you were watching.
I don't know what the alternative is if we are playing for the future of this planet. So we got to be dramatic. And what being dramatic is massive investments in wind, in solar. Massive, unprecedented investment. That is what the Green New Deal is about. I supported it, and I will fight to implement it.
What's your closing message tonight for those who are concerned about, affected by, or dealing with the coronavirus?
Well, our hearts go out to everyone. We need to move aggressively to make sure that every person in this country who has the virus, who thinks they have the virus, understands they get all the health care that they need because they are Americans, that we move aggressively to make sure that the test kits are out there, that the ventilators are out there, that the ICU units are out there, that the medical personnel are out there. This is a time to move aggressively, dealing with the coronavirus crisis, to deal with the economic fallout, but it is also a time to rethink America and create a country where we care about each other rather than a nation of greed and corruption, which is what is taking place among the corporate elite.
As I said at the outset, I just can't imagine what people are going through right now who have lost someone already. I can't imagine what people are going through when they have a mom. Like, for example, a good friend of ours is sitting outside the window of a nursing home where her mom is because she can't go in, trying to do sign language to her mom and through the window to be able to talk to her. I can't imagine the fear and I can't imagine the fear and concern people have. Number one of the things that I think we have to understand is that this is an all hands on deck. This is, as someone said, maybe it was you, Jake, at the outset, this is bigger than any individual. This is bigger than yourself. This is about America. This is about the world. This is about how we bring people together and make the kind of sacrifices we need to make to get this done. And so first and foremost, what we have to do is start to listen to the science again. As I said, what we did, we met, and what I'd be doing today, I'd be sitting down in the Situation Room literally every day like we did at the outset of other crises we had when we were in the White House, and pulling together the best people, and not just the United States, the world, and say, what are the prescriptive moves we have to take now to lessen this virus, to beat it? And then what do we do beyond that to make sure that the economic impact on them is, in fact, rendered harmless, that we, in fact, make sure every paycheck is met, every paycheck that's out there that people are going to miss, that we keep people in their homes, they don't miss their mortgage payments, they don't miss their rent payments. The single most significant thing we can do to deal with the larger problem down the road of income inequality is get rid of Donald Trump. Donald Trump. He's exacerbated every single one of these problems, both the immediate urgent need and how we're going to hold people harmless for the damage done as a consequence of this virus. It's important we do both.